Thank you for joining me today on the Private Investigator Experience podcast. I'm your host, Phil Little. On this channel, we talk about the life and times of a private investigator, cases we work in. Also, I look at situations out around the world that could affect us here at home. I've worn many hats and had many different types of uniforms on. My investigation all my whole life has been based on through the lens of that growing up on a farm in Missouri, the military, the law enforcement, intelligence service, global security background, quite a few different adventures, repelling out of helicopters in the Middle East, dodging missiles coming in, and law enforcement chasing alleys, guys down the alleys, with the middle of the night yelling, "Stop or I'll shoot." And then I also have a chef's side. And today I thought since this was Thanksgiving and I've got the turkey in the oven and all the things going on, I would use my different life. And this all started, this life of a chef, when my daughter, who was young, was raising her basically with myself, and she was coming home telling me that her Italian friends' mothers were cooking and doing all these things, and she wanted me to cook. I tried to tell her I wasn't a cook, but she said, "Dad, you're all I got." So I started learning how to cook better. So anyway, I thought today would be good to show that side of my life. As I suspect many of you have things that are away from your normal career that you can look at to just kind of relax and unwind. Cooking does that for me. Anyway, this is the second part of the post that I did recently, the first part, talking about the difference within the Islam religion and some of those issues that started the radicalization. And you can watch that in the first post if you haven't. I'm going to pick up where I left off on that first and finish this. I left off just talking about the two different ideas that have experts have had in the United States and other places of how we should fight this Islamic terrorism. And as I said again, this is not about all the Arab people or all Muslims. This is about radicals. And in this case, they are Islamic. They've been Christian in the past, they've been Jewish, they've been all kinds of things using terrorism to get their way. But in this particular case, we're focused on what's going on today in the world. And some would tell our government, oh, we should just look at this as acts of violence because it's really being done because those poor people are punished. They're without hope. They're in poverty. So we should just look at these violent acts as the result of that and deal with that, not looking at the underlying cause. And the second set of scholars then says we see this growing importance of radical ideologies derived from Islamic theology, principles, and concepts as a driving force of our current predicament. So we should fight it going to the root cause. Otherwise, it's just going to keep getting worse and bigger. I believe the failed policy since 9/11, and it started before, and the struggle against radicalism was built on false premises derived from the first set of literature. Bad ideas, not dealing with the causes. As a failure of American strategy since 2001, it's become increasingly clear, however, that the view has gained ground that ideology underlying Islamist violence must be tackled if our efforts are to be successful. This view is held by many in the Western world and in moderate Muslims who are trying to rise up and speak against the terrorism. Too many times they're shut down quickly or even killed. The Muslim reformers today can be found in positions of leadership in government, universities, press, and elsewhere. They're our natural allies. An important part of our future policy in the war on Islamic extremism should be to encourage and empower them. Now, I used the word DAWA. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but that is, and what this is, it is the act of inviting or calling people to understand and embrace Islam. It's like evangelizing in the Christian world. This involves sharing the message of the Quran and the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad with the goal of guiding others to the worship of their one true God and a righteous way of life. In their view, that is dawah. Now, from 9/11 until now, the dominant Western response to political Islam, which I talked about in the first post, has been to focus only on terror and violent extremism. This approach has failed in focusing only on acts of violence. We've ignored the ideology that justifies, promotes, celebrates, and encourages these acts. By not fighting a war of ideas against political Islam as an ideology and against those who spread that ideology, we've made a grave error. If Islamism is the ideology, then dawah encompasses all the methods by which it is spread. The term dawah refers to the activities carried out by Islamists to win supporters, to enlist them in a campaign to impose Sharia law on all societies. And I read a letter from an imam in Saudi Arabia in the first post that tells this like it is and the issues really are. Dawah is not the Islamic equivalent of religious evangelizing, although it is often disguised as such by blending humanitarian activities with subversive political activities. Modern Christianity doesn't do that. We don't proclaim trying to change laws or demanding that everybody believe like we do and make it part of a government. Dawah, as practiced by Islamists, employs a wide range of mechanisms to advance the goal of imposing Islamic Sharia law on society. This includes evangelizing, but extends beyond that. In Western countries, Dawah aims to both, they want to convert non-Muslims to political Islam, and then they want to bring these extreme views among the existing more moderate Muslims. They're trying to radicalize everybody. The ultimate goal of Dawah is to destroy the political institutions of a free society and replace them with strict Sharia law. Islamists rely both on violent and nonviolent means to achieve their objectives. And with all due respect to President Trump and all those around him, I caution, be aware of what the purposes of some of these organizations are and understand what it takes to contain them and not support them in spreading their way of life and trying to take over ours. Dawah, to the Islamists of today, was what the long march through the institutions was to 20th century Marxist communism. It's a subversion from within. The Marxists learned that was the only way they could really take over a strong free country, from within. The use of religious freedom in order to undermine that very freedom. And that's what's happened in our country. Worse, Islamic groups have enjoyed not just protection, but at times official sponsorship from government agencies, duped into regarding them as representatives of moderate Muslims simply because they do not engage in open violence. Islamic groups that have been treated this way include the Council on American Islamic Relations, the Muslim Public Affairs Council, the Islamic Society of North America, the International Institute of Islamic Thought, and the Islamic Society of Boston. For organizations engaged in Dawah, the main elements of the strategy are to have a well-organized Islamic groups such as the Muslim Brotherhood, who claim to speak on behalf of all Muslims, but they're marginalizing Muslim reformers and dissidents. The Muslim Brotherhood is a terrorist organization. started in Egypt. Egypt outlawed them and have designated them a terrorist organization and stamped them out and working on that in their country. So why should we be promoting them in the U.S.? The recent executive order by President Trump to classify them as a terrorist organization wasn't exactly what it turned out to be. What it is, if you read it, they've set up a situation where they're supposed to try to evaluate which groups of the Muslim Brotherhood are terrorists. That's not going to work because they all are. Then they also try to take ownership of immigration trends. They want to encourage the Islamization of Western societies, get more of their people in by what Biden did during the last term, upwards of 20 million that he allowed into the country without any real background of knowing who they are. Also, their purpose is to reduce women to the status of reproductive machines for the purpose of demographic transformation. And then they want to take advantage of the focus on inclusion. Oh, does that sound familiar? The USFA? By progressive political parties in democratic societies. That is the left, and that's happening in our country. Then they want to force these parties to accept Islamic demands in the name of peaceful coexistence. Are we living that out right now? That's going on all around us, folks. We need to wake up. Then they want to take advantage of self consciously progressive movements. They want to effectively co opt them, they want to use them for their own benefit. They want to increase Islamist hold. Now, listen to this one on the educational system, including charter schools, faith schools, yes, faith schools, and homeschooling. And that has been done dramatically. If we look at our education system across the United States, the school boards, the radical elements that have come into so much of our country and it's been exposed over the last, particularly with this new administration, we're in trouble, folks. Wake up. Islamists study target societies to identify points of vulnerability. So they look at things within a country, maybe at minorities, those within the prison populations. They try to develop and get different races at each other's throats, create and internal turmoil. And we can see how they infiltrated the Women's March and Black Lives Matter, they're using for their own purposes. Agents of Dawa systematically lobby private sector organizations, governments, and international bodies. They seek to pressure governments to heed to Islamic demands on the grounds of freedom of religion. Listen to me. Freedom of religion or status as a religious minority. That's one of their purposes. Step by step, they try to keep going to take us over. They urge the United Nations and the European Council to combat Islamophobia by devising what amounts to censorship guidelines for politicians and journalists by punishing those who dissent. Look at England. What's going on? If you don't know what's going on, Google it and do some research. They are taking over the streets. They're arresting people for posting something that supposedly is derogatory to Islam or Prophet Muhammad. On and on. That's happening. And it can happen in the United States of America if we don't wake up. They pressed institutions such as the Associated Press to distort the language they use to suit Islamic objectives. They waged sustained campaigns to discredit critics of radical Islam, even other Muslim groups. Well, what about the funding of Dawah? There are estimates that since the early 1970s, Middle Eastern charities have distributed over $125 billion, $50 billion, which has found its way to Africa, contributed heavily to Islamic terrorism there. Non-government organizations in Kuwait, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia continue to distribute large sums of overseas to finance the ideological indoctrination activities. It's in our schools here, friends, way beyond anything that we can imagine. The powerful foundations, such as the Qatar Foundation, continue to grant financial support and legitimacy to radical Islamic ideology around the world. Qatar has been a big supporter, funder of Hamas. And even though they've made some supposed concessions in this peace treaty, they're trying every way they can to prevent that from happening and having Hamas completely disbanded and isolated. With informal funding mechanisms, when they're all included, the charitable funds now available could reach the hundreds of billions of dollars worldwide each year. My friends, this is a critical problem, and we have to take it as that. Then what is that problem? Let it be said explicitly again. The Islamist program is fundamentally incompatible with the U.S. Constitution, our religious tolerance, the equality of men and women, the tolerance of different sexual orientations, and other fundamental rights. Yes, we are a Christian nation, formed on Christian principles and biblical principles, but we allow people to not believe that, to not believe in God, to not believe in Christianity, as long as they don't try to change our way of life. The biggest challenge the United States faces in combating political Islam, however, is the extent to which agents of Dawa can exploit the constitutional and legal protections that guarantee American citizens freedom of religion and freedom of speech. Freedoms. Listen to this, lean in. If they get in power, the fundamentalists, they would sweep away our freedoms instantly if they could impose Sharia law. Some years ago, one senior American intelligence official summed it up this way. In the U.S., there are First Amendment issues. We're all aware of them. It's not a crime to radicalize only when you try to turn it to violence or talk about violence. America it will be very vulnerable to a threat that is not only diversifying, more importantly, intensifying. Radical imams have openly endorsed the Islamist State. They posted gruesome videos and praised terrorist attacks overseas. Experts say that imams can take their supporters right up to the line. It's like making a cake and not putting in the final ingredients. It winks and nods all the way. This is what we're up against. The global constitution of political Islam is formable. The Muslim Brotherhood, with its numerous American affiliates, is an important component, not the only one. The Muslim Brotherhood is spread across the United States with supposed nonviolent organizations. Now, even if we were able to eliminate the Brotherhood overnight, the ideological infrastructure of Dawa would remain powerful. The network of radical Islamic preachers, charities, organizations that promote political Islam is already well established inside and outside the United States. To resist the rapid growth of political Islam, we need to develop a strategy to counter not only those who use violence to advance their political religious objectives, the jihadists, but also the great and complex ideological infrastructure known as Dawa. Just as we counted both the Red Army and the ideology of communism in the Cold War, which we won against. Focusing only on terror as a tactic is insufficient. We ignore at our peril the ideological infrastructure that supports political Islam in both its violent and non-violent form. We can't afford, my friends, to ignore that. It's not just that jihad is an extension of dawah, according to some observers. It is dawah by other means. Differently, nonviolent and violent Islamists differ only on tactics. They share the same goal: which is establish an unfree society ruled by strict Sharia law. Institutionally, nonviolent Islamists have benefited from terror attacks committed by the jihadists because such attacks make nonviolent Islamists appear modern in the eyes of Western governments, even when their goals and values are not ours. ISIS was the best thing to happen to these groups. Nowadays, the bar is so low that if groups aren't ISIS, we're happy. If they're not overtly supporting terrorism, we think they're okay. We don't stop to think where the terrorism comes from, where the root cause is. Dawa, its agents hide behind congressional protections and constitutional protections. The things that they would dismantle unhesitatingly were they in power. In 2025, Congress must therefore give the president the tools he needs to dismantle the infrastructure of Dawa in the United States and to counter the spread of political Islam at home and abroad. If we extend unlimited freedom even to those who are against our way of life, if we're not prepared to defend our free society against the onslaught of any who would try to take us over, then our freedom will be destroyed and our republic with them, and we will become their slaves. We should claim the right to suppress them. Anyone that would try to tear down our government, if necessary, by force. We should claim that any movement reaching to take away our rights and laws itself is outside the law. And should consider incitement to violence, and it should be prosecuted as criminal in the same way as we consider incitement to murder or to kidnapping or any other crime as criminal. There's so much to this. We Americans have been asleep. I've been asleep. We sat on the sidelines while our freedoms were taken away, while education systems were taken over by those who wanted to indoctrinate our young people. And as we've said before, all it takes is one generation to be indoctrinated into a non-compliant, non-free society that we will lose our freedoms. Every generation has to stand up and push back against this radical forces, no matter where they come from. When they came from communism and Marxism, we stood up. When we came from Hitler and his group, we stood up. When it's come from others, an attack on Pearl Harbor, we stood up. It's time now we Americans stand up. Let our voices be heard. Take back our country. Ensure that our laws are protected and that criminals are prosecuted and we clear our country of all people who came here illegally, particularly those that are from violent backgrounds and committing violence in the United States. Let me know what you think. Leave your comments on any of the platforms, or you can email me at pi777 at gmail.com. If I'm missing something, let me know. Check out what I'm saying and see what you find out. And if you happen to have a problem in your business or family or other situation that you wonder, could a PI help me? Send me that in a summary to pi777 at gmail.com, and I'll let you know if a PI can help and how it might work. Again, happy Thanksgiving, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and may God bless you abundantly during this wonderful holiday season that we have here in America. So until next time, may God bless you, your family, and may God bless America. Stay safe.